Hello, Robby here, inventor of the xPower battery, the world's first self-recharging battery. And I'm here at Universal City in lovely Osaka. Now, in this video, I want to take us something very specific. And I'm not going to try and prove or disprove, but what I will do is share with you what I've come to learn and know from my own experience and studies. And the topic is free energy. Now, this is something that was started by the genius and probably the most prominent individual for anyone who's investigated or became curious of free energy, known as Nikola Tesla. A Serbian born in Croatia. And so the only thing I share with Tesla is being of Croatian heritage myself, and also as an entrepreneur and amateur inventor, somebody who was curious about the world around him and was willing to pursue that curiosity no matter where it took him. Hence the discovery of the xPower battery. Now, for many of you watching this video, free energy is something that you've come to either believe or believe is possible based on what you've discovered throughout your research and your own studies, and for others it's impossible. There are many debunkers of free energy devices, and there's a lot of science and scientists who have put forth their own views and opinions based on scientific laws. Now, the issue with free energy is that it does violate any number of scientific laws, and therefore it's automatically dismissed. Can't be done. Impossible. Only because certain laws are violated. But that's not science at all. That's really a religion of some sort. A belief. No matter what the observable truths are, tested and demonstrated to prove otherwise. And that's science. That's classical science. The pursuit of truth through observations, through testing, retesting, and then following what comes up, what's observed, what's documented. That's science. And for some of you watching this, you might be familiar with what I'm about to discuss. And for many who are just getting orientated to this subject, you wouldn't have heard of these two chemists, these two scientists, who back in 1989, Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons first introduced the world to their discovery, known as, or what got known as, cold fusion. Now, just to give you a bit of grounding on what that means, without going into all of it, basically what they put forth in their discovery was something that was considered impossible. It violated a number of scientific laws. So it couldn't be done or achieved. Now, what cold fusion ultimately is the generation of heat from a cold water source. And that's a form of nuclear fusion, and it's under the current scientific laws, it's an impossibility. Now, when you look into this and you do your own research, you will see what actually occurred. In the end, a panel of scientists ended up voting whether or not cold fusion was going to be introduced into the scientific world. Sadly but true, Fleischmann and Pons, and along with their discovery cold fusion, were voted out of the scientific world. Now, if you truly understand what I've just said, we all vote in a democratic way, whether that's for our government, local, state, national, whether that's for a new president at the club or at the school. Voting has no place in the scientific world. The fact that that happened is just disgusting. But it happened, and you can do your own research. Go online, go on YouTube, and you will see it for yourself. A vote of individual scientists who tried to erase a discovery made by two credible chemists, Fleischmann and Pons. And here's a small snippet of that, just so you get a bit of a taste for yourself. But I am going to leave a link down below so you can find a bit more for your details and make it easier for you.
Science declared war on cold fusion. Was the promise of cold fusion too good to be true? Or was it trampled on by closed-minded, greedy power brokers whose special interests outweighed the public good?
Prior to the 1989 announcement, Stephen E. Jones, a physics professor at nearby Brigham Young University, learned of Pons and Fleischmann's work through an informant at the DOE. In a flagrant example of shameless opportunism, Jones insisted on going public quickly with his comparatively much less clear results. Disparaging the excess heat claims of Fleischmann and Pons, Jones' announcement would have effectively prevented the two scientists from patenting their process, a process they had developed on their own over long years of research.
Now, moving along, I want to take up something that's familiar with all of us, and that's the sun. Obviously, there's no sun today, clearly visible, because of the storm that blew in overnight. But when you study the history of the sun scientifically, you will appreciate what I'm about to share with you based on my own discoveries and insights. First of all, in the mid-1900s, a scientist put forth the theory that the sun was just a big burning ball of nuclear fusion, because that's what, after World War II, the world and the scientific world were familiar with. And that theory has stuck ever since. So eventually, we are told, and we are taught in our schools, that that big burning ball, known as the sun, is going to burn out some point down the future. Now, prior to that, the scientific world believed that the sun itself was a big chunk of coal burning away, because that's what the scientific world knew at the time, and so they could relate to that. What I'm going to share with you isn't something that I'm putting forth as a theory. It's something that I've come to appreciate and understand through my own curiosity and research. And it was put forth by a group known as the Thunderbolts Project, which is a movement that's been around for at least 10 years, led by a fellow Aussie physicist, Wal Thornhill, from the University of Australia in Canberra, which is my own hometown, funny enough. Now, if you studied the Thunderbolts Project and what they have to say, basically what they're putting forth and what they're trying to correct in the scientific world is that the world itself, the universe, the galaxies, the sun, it's all electric and some form of magnetism, and that's it. So when you do look into it and look into the science behind what they present as far as the sun, they say that the sun itself is electrically charged by the universe, an inexhaustible amount of energy. Now, this energy has been referred to many times and it's got numerous names. But the classical example I try to share with people when I do discuss this subject was given by a very famous scientist, and he became a bit of a TV celebrity doing the early shows on science, by the name of Richard Feynman. And that is, if you imagine this glass that I'm holding here containing this inexhaustible amount of energy. Now, what Feynman stated once, famously, was that at that time, and this is the early 70s, late 60s, that this amount of energy in this one glass, it was estimated that it was enough to boil all the oceans of the world. Now, as I said earlier, this energy has become known by various names over the years, anywhere from zero-point energy to the quantum field, space energy, etc., etc. Now, here's a snippet from the Thunderbolts Project on the sun, and I just wanted to give you a bit of a taste of it.
They have become worse. Astronomers remain unaware of Hans Alfvén's admonition to first understand the electric circuits of the sun if you want to understand its magnetism. You compare these images of the sun, which we'll just bring up. Compare these images of the sun with a comment by Fred Hoyle in Frontiers of Astronomy, that's back in 1955, where he wrote, "We should expect on the basis of a straightforward calculation that the sun would end itself in a simple and rather prosaic way, that with increasing height above the photosphere, the density of the solar material would decrease quite rapidly until it became pretty well negligible, only 2 or 3 kilometres up. Instead, the atmosphere is a huge bloated envelope. Not only that, the atmosphere extends well out through the planetary system to the heliosphere." Ralph Jurgens in 1980 stated the obvious answer for those not blinded by their training, and you see the quote here. "The modern astrophysical concept that ascribes the sun's energy to the thermonuclear reactions deep in the solar interior is contradicted by nearly every observable aspect of the sun." That was published in 1980. When I read his paper, it just seemed so obvious to me that he was correct.
For those of you who have a bit more of an interest and have pursued this subject of science or been taught this in college or university or high school, you would be familiar with a number of the phenomena of the sun. Astrophysicists and those that deal with this area are constantly observing something that shouldn't be happening, and based on scientific laws, they need to then come up with another theory, solution, or answer as to what they're observing and what is actually occurring in the physical world. And sometimes this is known as a bugger factor in mathematics, science, etc. I'm sure it's got other names, but that's one I'm familiar with. Now, in the Thunderbolts project, these scientists present clear, demonstrable evidence, and they compare it to what is currently known or believed to be scientific truth. But it's not really truth because it's just a theory to explain what is observed. Obviously, they can't test the coronas, but they can analyze the data that's been recorded over the years. And here's another snippet from the Thunderbolts project, just so you can get a bit more of a grasp on what we're discussing here.
Birkeland wrote with his unusual prescience in the Norwegian Aurora Polaris expedition in 1902-3, "It might be imagined that the interior of the sun formed a positive pole for enormous electric currents." This was Jurgens' conclusion also. "This assumption has the advantage of appearing to give a natural explanation of the movement of the sunspots in various latitudes," he wrote, which he demonstrated with his Torella experiments. This guy was a great experimentalist. "In this case, the origin of the sunspots must be that the presumptive, more or less insulating photospheric envelope was sometimes pierced by disruptive discharges, thus forming great electric arcs. This is the position of the electric universe model."
Okay, now just to wrap up this video, there are two credible inventors that I want to bring to your attention. The first one is an American scientist. He was Harvard trained and MIT trained, by the name of Bruce De Palma. Now, in the 70s, Bruce got curious and he started exploring and experimenting, and eventually he developed what became known, or what he termed as the N machine. Now, in simple terms, just imagine this cup of noodles as the N machine. What Bruce claimed, and he actually did get a PCT patent, a patent corporation treaty, and you can see all this on his website, which I'll link down below in the description box. But his claim was, you put 1 watt of energy into the N machine, and coming out was 10 watts of energy. That's right, 10 watts. And under current scientific laws, impossible. Complete violation, can't be done. Now, Bruce being a scientist, he got individual scientists that he knew or didn't know to validate it separately, that validate the claims, to validate the end machine, which they did. And you can see all that on his website. And I hope you do go take some time to study that, because he was a credible individual, not a kook, not a con man, not somebody in it for purely money or whatever it may be. But sadly, Bruce and his invention of the end machine went the way that many have before and even after Bruce, to the point where he ended up leaving America about 93. He came to Australia, my country, and eventually passed away in New Zealand in 1994. And that's all I'm going to say or raise, because the point is, he was a credible source, a trained scientist who invented a device, a cleaner, greener, and a smarter form of producing energy. And we all could be enjoying his end machine right now, but we aren't. And there's many reasons and whys for that, but I'm not going to cover that. Secondly, the other inventor, an Austrian individual by the name of William Mulhern, who was also in the pursuit of free energy early in his life, and he ended up making the discovery and his invention of the aquapole, and he's actually built an international company around that invention. Now, the aquapole, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a device that's installed in a building or a home that's suffering from water dampness. Water that's seeping up through the earth and through the foundations of the building or house and penetrating in the walls and causing issues, anywhere from mold, damage, etc., etc. Now, when you study the aquapole and what William has to say about it, once installed in a building, a home, the aquapole will run forever. And it will run with no source of power. That is, no batteries, no electricity. And it will push the water down and keep it down to infinity. And here's a small snippet from a video that William did at an energy movement, where he discusses this. And more so, where he discusses that his theory, because that's what it is, because he can't actually prove it yet, will mean that science laws as they're known will have to be rewritten because of the observable truth that he's demonstrating with the aquapole. And that's the point I'm raising it here with you.
So now I show you how this gravomagnetic field is how it works, how it comes to. Phase one, you have R, free energy, come into the planet. You have these different kinds of layers, A to D, which get penetrated from any direction by this free energy, right? Or space energy, I call it zero-point energy, or whatever you want. So, this is step one, phase one. Phase two, it comes to the core, on the left side, it comes to the core and going through the core. And my theory is that the core of the Earth is not nickel or iron, it is hydrogen. It is hydrogen. I'm very sure. I was not there, but but I'm very sure. I have a lot of evidences. Yeah, hydrogen. Yes, molecule on a molecule hydrogen. So and this free energy, you see these yellow waves, goes through the core and changes in another kind of energy. Now here, in a gravomagnetic energy, you see it on the white waves, okay? So you come to this point, and with the gravomagnetic energy, with the core matter specific frequency, because every matter had its own frequency. You can check it. So the next thing is it going to the others, to the other layers, And the reduction, there is a reduction of this field because matter is a resistance to every kind of fields, basically. Yeah? So they get a reduction, but come out here, you see that on the point, with a very small signal, but it's still there. And then you have it all over the world. So I say this because I'm in Europe. Now we are also in South Africa, so on the other hemisphere. It's working also in South Africa. It's not only working in Europe. So I'm very sure that this is all over the world. Okay? So then you have this phase that basically you can say now this geogravomagnetism is a manifestation of space energy. Yeah? Because then you have a lot of materials, a lot of different materials, then you have also a lot of frequencies. So there are existing a gravomagnetic field with a lot of different frequencies. Depends of the content of the planet. Then can you imagine, 2,000 square meters, you have in a building, in a wall, you have sometimes in 1 cubic meter, 600 liters of water. Can you imagine that? How many tons of water this little thing here, this very little tiny turbo baby here, yeah, turn the moisture around and move it down in 1 or 2 years, sometimes 3 years, okay. Sometimes when the moisture is very high, it takes more than 2 or 3 years. But can you imagine that? There are tons of moisture, tons. This is not kilos, not pounds. You're speaking of tons. So there is a lot of work which this guy are doing here with free energy. And the most of that with free energy. Okay, so first thing, energy up. Then the working area get polarized. You have it in the green field, but this green field would be very small because if you just have this energy from the bottom, you have no very funny output. But in the reality, is that. So you see, you get a very, very much bigger volume of output. It's 10,000 times bigger than the space of the input. 10,000 times bigger and more. It depends on some circumstances. So why is it? If you check with a physician, he said, no, that's not possible. Because where is the energy who make it 10 times or 100 times more? What's going on here? Where is the energy balance? So the only answer is that comes from above. And we did an experiment, and we measured that. 1991. There is, from above, there comes this energy in this funnel. It's a funnel, right? This is a funnel. It's a funnel. This funnel phenomena you see very, very often in the nature. Very, very often. This open funnel phenomena. And this is the funnel for free energy. Then we are in the vortexes and everything. You see so much funnel phenomena. So, and this is why it works. So, without that, it cannot work. It's impossible. Physical, impossible.